Gabriel Jesus, Edison, and Trent Alexander-Arnold are three of the weirdest players around. They have one thing in common. Is Jesus one of the best centre forwards in the league? Yes, but... Is Edison one of the best goalkeepers in the league? Yes, but... Is Trent one of the best right backs in the league? Yes, but... All three have a fairly important caveat attached to their name due to a significant weakness. There is almost no such thing as the perfectly rounded player, but what makes these three stick out is that their glaring weakness is what their position traditionally demands of them. Or at least that's the perception, but is any of that true? In Edison's case, at best, the eye test has him down as a decent, just perfectly okay shot stopper, but there have been accusations of him being a bit of a hologram when it comes to making big saves when his side needs him. Over the past 4 seasons, we could look at his number of clean sheets and clean sheet percentage, and that would suggest that he's one of the best around. However, this can be completely misleading, as clean sheets are also highly dependent on the quality of the players ahead of you, as well as the side's playing style. A better measure of this would be post-shot expected goals. A brief explanation of what this is. The most basic measure of a keeper's ability would be just to look at the shots saved. Wow, this keeper faced 20 shots and conceded 0. He had a great game. Until you realize that 10 of those shots were off target. Okay, so let's look at shots on target. He faced 10 shots and saved 10. Great. Until you realize that all 10 of those were speculative shots from range that just about reached the goalkeeper. So the second best stat to assess a keeper is expected goals saved. If a goalie faced 10 shots from range, the combined XG of all these shots might be like 0.3. So an average goalkeeper probably wouldn't concede from these shots. Compare that to a goalkeeper who has faced 10 shots as well, but from these regions, where the expected goals might be closer to 3. But he didn't concede any, so he must be great. He saved 3 expected goals. Now we're getting closer to the truth. But what XG doesn't account for is how good the shot actually was, and if the keeper actually did anything. So for example, a shot from here would have a much higher XG than a shot from out here. But if this shot goes off target, it has a 0% chance of going in, because an off target shot can never be a goal. However, if this low quality shot actually ends up here, it does now have a good chance of becoming a goal. So it has a high post-shot expected goal rating. So the best way to assess a keeper is post-shot expected goals saved. So back to Edison. So when looking at his post-shot XG versus the goals he's actually conceded, in the past 3 seasons he has conceded more than the average goalkeeper would be expected to in those situations. And in the last 2 seasons, he's below the 50th percentile for goalkeepers. Gabriel Jesus, of course, has the opposite Achilles heel, his finishing. At least that's what the eye test says, but is it true? Well, looking at his XG since coming into the Premier League, the answer is a resounding yes, underperforming his XG in every single season, which is hard to comprehend. And over the last 3 seasons, he's in the bottom 30 percentile or worse for finishing. So over his 8 seasons, he scored 24 goals less than expected. Compare this to somebody else who gets a lot of grief for their finishing, Sterling, who has only scored 9 less than expected over a longer time period. Trent Alexander-Arnold poses a defensive dilemma for Klopp. Looking at his defensive statistics doesn't make for the best reading, particularly over the last 3 seasons, with his percentage of dribblers tackled, challenges lost, and errors all being in the bottom 35 percentile or lower. So why do great managers like Klopp, Pep and Arteta keep playing these players, and why are they still considered amongst the best in their position in the league, if not the world? Well, players in this mold may not excel at what they're supposed to be good at, but they excel not only in other areas, but more specifically areas that are difficult to find in other players in their position. Gabriel Jesus is not just okay or pretty good at link-up play, he is elite, with extremely high numbers for passes attempted, key passes and shot creating actions. He's able to create for his fellow teammates. But even more impressive, while he may not be a traditional target man, his false line abilities make him an elite outlet option whenever his side are under pressure, as he makes himself available when the midfield is clogged. He's never fallen below the 90th percentile for progressive passes received, or below the 84th percentile for this stat. While the rise of possession football has demanded more and more from goalkeepers, there's no doubting that Edison is near the top for composure and passing ability. Here, he is in the upper percentile for passes attempted, despite City usually camping in the opponent's half. He rarely goes long with his passes, instead scanning the pitch for the best pass to retain possession. But even when he does go long, he's more accurate than pretty much every goalkeeper. Trent on the ball is absolutely obscene. His creativity, both from wide when he takes up a more traditional wide role, or even from an inside position when Salah occupies the width, are not far off the level of the best playmaker the Premier League has seen in De Bruyne, with ridiculous assist and expected assist numbers, as well as passes into the box. But it's not just about creating chances. He can genuinely break the game open from deep, especially when he plays more infield, being in the 90th percentile plus over the last 4 seasons for passes received, touches, and passes attempted for fullbacks. Once again, these aren't safe 10-yard passes, as he seeks to change the state of the game with progressive passes that break the opposition lines or raking long balls to switch the play. But these players are still a dilemma that need to be accounted for, so what are the 3 fates that usually await this archetype of player? This is possibly the most common outcome because their traits are so rare. The weaknesses of these players will only be an unacceptable drawback if they are confined to the traditional definition of what players in their position should do. You only look at their traits in isolation and not as a part of the wider ecosystem of the whole team. Managers are aware of the players' weaknesses, but they believe that their strengths will help their team more than their weaknesses will hinder it. So with this option, managers build around the player. For Gabriel Jesus, this is often in the shape of his movement and link-up play, working perfectly to facilitate goal-scoring wingers like Raheem Sterling, Sane, and now Saka and Martinelli. Ederson allows City to bait teams higher up into the press to try and stop teams sitting deeper for 90 minutes, and Ederson can then look for the perfect pass to break the game open. Trent, for large parts of his career, worked in conjunction with Henderson, who had an incredible engine, and when Trent bombed forward, Henderson would put in the hard yards to cover for him. But with Henderson gone, Klopp has built around Trent in a different way, accepting that when defending, if he's isolated, it probably won't end well. However, what he will bring on the ball will outweigh that. The second fate is a positional shift. This is less applicable to Ederson, although we do see more and more of Pep using him as a high centre-back in possession. But Trent has been allowed to invert much more, especially with the departure of Henderson, and putting him in a position to take advantage of his talents on the ball. Probably a welcome change for Trent. Jesus, on the other hand, saw an unwelcome change nearer the end of his City spell, as in 21-22 his poor finishing meant that Pep for a significant portion of time used him wide, where he could still take advantage of his creative play and defensive effort, but not rely on him to be the main threat for goals. Fate 3 is an uncomfortable one for players in this mold. At times, if you are particularly poor at a large part of your responsibility, you are constantly at risk of a manager losing patience or faith with having to work around you. Jesus found this at City, with perhaps his antithesis in Haaland replacing him, who is a lot worse at the extras that Jesus brings, but is just really good at the one thing expected from players in his position. Trent has found this in the international setup, where he found a manager not as willing to find a system to work around him, and that manager preferred to field right-backs who are much more solid in the defensive phase. On the international front, it might be a stretch to say Ederson had a similar fate, as he is up against an all-timer goalkeeper in Alisson, who is good to great on the ball compared to excellent from Ederson, but more importantly, he's outstanding at the goalkeeper thing, keeping the ball out of the net, and as a result, he is often the first choice. It is the beauty of the modern game that players are no longer just constrained by the title of their position, but there are also valid criticisms to be had. So do you agree with me? And what other players of this ilk come to mind for you? If you want to look at a player who had his fair share of drawbacks, but was so good that managers were more than happy to build around him, take a look at Ronaldo's most iconic performance,